With the upcoming release of Episode 1 of the Final Fantasy VII Remake, most of the Final Fantasy community seems to be eagerly awaiting it. However, while the remake has shown a lot of flash and style, some of us are wondering if the changes to the remake might ruin a gaming classic. The gaming industry has changed a lot since 1997, and the remake definitely has some big shoes to fill. This is the 5 reasons why I think the Final Fantasy VII Remake might suck. 5 and 4 go together like dog turds and hot summer days. What better way to repackage cut content than to sell it back to the consumer for $15 a pop? Season passes and microtransactions such as cosmetics or weapons are all the rage these days, and Square Enix is the king of playing on people's nostalgia. What a shame it would be to see side quests or maybe even whole areas limited to DLC. Final Fantasy VII also has the spin-off games that expand the story in meaningful ways, so I wouldn't be surprised to see them repackage and condense things like Crisis Core and sell it back to us. When all is said and done, the Final Fantasy VII Remake might be the ultimate way to experience the universe of Final Fantasy VII, but I just have to wonder what the final cost will be. Adding on to the DLC complaint I had for number 5, Final Fantasy VII is a massive game. Between all the amounts of minigames, side bosses, chocobo training, enemy skills to get, and so on, it can easily take you over 100 hours to fully complete the game. Things like the Fort Condor side quest are almost games within a game, with entirely new mechanics and systems. When all is said and done, Square Enix will likely end up spending a massive amount remaking Final Fantasy VII and are going to be looking for a substantial return on their efforts. So is it really important to have non-story critical content in a game that will probably be spanning at least 3 or more episodes? Things like the Knights of the Round side quest are prime candidates for being cut in my opinion, due to how few players will actually experience that endgame content. Just take a look at how much cut content that Final Fantasy 15 had, and then you consider that game was in at least a conceptual level of development since before Final Fantasy 13. Final Fantasy 7 has a lot of what I would call weird moments. Cloud dressing up as a girl to infiltrate a mafia boss's hideout that also has a sex dungeon basement is just one of many. There's also this one part where Cloud beats the hell out of Tifa while he's being mind controlled by Sephiroth. It's pretty brutal, and I can't imagine how they should even begin to approach some of the more extreme or out there scenes that occur in Final Fantasy VII. After all, text boxes and jaggy polygons leaves you a lot more detached from what's going on in the story compared to photorealistic designs with voice acting. Speaking of the graphical upgrade the remake will be receiving, it'll be interesting to see how they do certain characters such as Cait Sith in the new graphical style. I also have to imagine they'll be changing some parts of the localization because of issues like Barrett swearing too much and Tifa calling Cloud a word that is looked down upon far more than back in 1997. Regardless of script changes, rearranging, removing, or even adding additional story content has the potential to take away some of the charm that Final Fantasy VII originally had. Does anyone actually think this episodic format thing is a good idea? Episodic gaming is the gaming equivalent of blue balls. Episodes will often end right when the going is getting good, typically on a cliffhanger or other pivotal moment. There's also the news that they might potentially charge $60 for each episode, which is a joke. Potentially $180 plus for a game that originally cost less than half of that. And I don't think this is gonna happen, but we all know the Half-Life 2 story. Unlike the olden days when you were prompted to insert the next disc, who knows how long you'll have to wait to get your next fix of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. 3 months? 6 months? Who knows? But we do know that game companies aren't exactly the most reliable when it comes to delivering episodic gaming in a timely manner. And when you consider that Square Enix will sometimes leave games in the oven for upwards of 5 or more years on a semi-regular basis, my Magic 8 Ball is reading Outlook not so good. Number 1 is no turn-based combat, and this is my personal most hated aspect of the Final Fantasy VII Remake. The active time battle system was used in the majority of Final Fantasies before 10, and was widely considered to be the go-to style of doing combat in the series. Of course, there was some tweaks to the system over the years, but it largely remained the same. Starting with 10 though, Square Enix tried changing it up with mixed results depending on who you ask. Out of the non-MMO games, 11 and 14, Final Fantasy X did away with the time portion of the system, opting to go for purely turn-based combat. 12 had a pseudo MMO style where you could set up your party with a series of pre-programmed commands, and Final Fantasy XIII had the paradigm shift mechanic where you don't actually directly control most of your party, but rather control their classes and abilities. With Final Fantasy XV, we saw yet another shift, this time to action combat, similar to Kingdom Hearts, and it seems that the Final Fantasy VII Remake is following in 15's footsteps of moving to action combat. This has caused a pretty steep divide between those who love the traditional turn-based combat of the past and those who preferred the more free-form action combat of 15. Of course, you can see where I stand on this issue, seeing as I'm listing it as a reason for why the Final Fantasy VII Remake might suck. Only time will tell how good the combat is in the remake, but games like Persona 5 and Dragon Quest XI have shown that traditional JRPG turn-based combat still has a place in today's gaming world. To me, it's a little puzzling to see Square Enix change one of the core gameplay mechanics of Final Fantasy VII, especially when you realize we haven't gotten a traditional turn-based Final Fantasy in over a decade, and this would be the perfect opportunity for one. There you have it. 5 reasons why I think the Final Fantasy VII Remake might suck. Again, I'd just like to reiterate my mindset that I'm not expecting this game to suck, but if you're going into it expecting nothing more than a prettied up version of childhood nostalgia, you might be disappointed. Call me a hater or whatever, but I don't think I'm being negative for no reason. I like to think I'm more of a traditionalist, if you will, when it comes to remakes, and the FF7 remake is making me wonder how much can a remake change the original game and still retain the same core feelings. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to see future content, but as always, thanks for watching.